Hi, everybody. It's Miss Rose. It's week 5, and the theme of the week is going to be angles. There is a ton of vocabulary that has to do with angles, but don't worry, I'm going to explain all of these words as we go through and do some examples. I'm sure most of them look familiar to you also. So look for all these words to come up throughout this quick lesson. All right, here's the first thing. This is an angle, and it can be named in a bunch of different ways. There's a little angle symbol that you use when you're naming angles. So one way that we could name this angle is we could actually just call it angle Q. Q is the vertex of the angle. And vertex is a word that we're going to be using a lot. It's where the two rays that make up the angle come to a point. That's really the most important letter when you're naming an angle. We're not going to use this one letter way of naming things all that often, though, because we're going to be using a lot of complicated diagrams where there's a bunch of different angles that have a vertex at Q, and just calling it one letter is often confusing. So it's a possible option, but really only in an example like this where it's just one angle alone by itself. You could also call it the little number that's inside. If there's ever a little number there, you can name the angle that way. So you could also name this angle angle 1 because there's a little number 1 there. Here's the most common ways to name them, though. You use 3 letters, and that vertex letter has to be in the middle. So there's 2 options. You could either call it SQR or RQS. But notice for both of those, that letter Q, that vertex is in the middle. So that's the most important thing. So that's one really key idea when it comes to talking about angles. So this symbol, you might remember, means congruent. So how do you show that angles are congruent to each other? Because you can't really just put tick marks on them. So what you want to do is you want to put an arc on them. So FHG, notice the H is the letter in the middle. That's the vertex. You put an arc by that vertex. And then JKL, you put the same arc by that vertex too. You could do a plain arc. You could do an arc with a tick. You could do a double arc. You could put 2 tick marks. It doesn't matter as long as the 2 angles match each other, then it shows that they're congruent to each other. All right, when we were talking about segments, we talked about segments being bisected and trisected. So same thing with angles. Angles can be bisected and trisected. So bisected angles are split into 2 equal parts. So you want to put 2 congruent arcs on them. So angle ABC, notice the B is the middle letter because it's the vertex. So at the B, we want to put 2 matching arcs. I like to use tick marks for these because sometimes if you just put 2 plain arcs, it just kind of looks like you put one giant arc on the angle. So this way I can really tell that you were marking the 2 angles next to each other. And then I could show for the second diagram that angle is trisected, so it's split into 3 congruent parts. And again, the B is in the middle because the B is the vertex. So I'm going to go arc, arc, arc on those 3 parts. I think I'll use a double tick this time. It's kind of small, so I don't have a ton of space for it. But just to show you guys another example, 3 matching markings. So that shows that the angle's trisected or split into 3 equal parts. All right, here's another key vocabulary word. Angle ABC is a right angle. So you may know that a right angle means that it measures 90 degrees. And we're going to learn in the coming weeks other vocabulary dealing with right angles also. But this is a concept that gets used all the time in geometry class. A right angle is a very special angle. So you don't just put a regular arc on it, you put a little box on it to show that it's a 90-degree angle. So the B is the middle letter. So at the B, the vertex, I'm going to make a little right angle box. And that's how you show that an angle is a right angle. All right, so let's try this fill in the blank activity. So there's a diagram with a whole bunch of stuff marked on it and some stuff that we can talk about in the picture. So another name for angle 1, I mentioned that it's good to use 3 letters. So there's a bunch of different options, but the Z has to be in the middle because the Z is the vertex. So I'm going to call it BZU. So angle, don't forget your little angle symbol. BZU would be another name for angle 1. The next part talks about a bisected angle. So you want to look for those 2 matching arcs next to each other, and that shows you that that angle is bisected. So the thing that does the bisecting is the segment. And then you name the angle that got bisected, that got split into two parts. So that's what I'm looking for here. So we're going to say segment BU. The order doesn't really matter. UB would have been fine also. Bisects that angle. As long as the B is in the middle, I could call it angle CBZ, or I could have called it ZBC. Either way. All right, the next one's looking for a right angle. Do you see a little right angle box in there? There it is. The C has to be the middle letter. So again, the order doesn't really matter, but the C has to be in the middle. So I'm going to call it BCU. I also could have called it BCZ, or I could have named it backwards as long as the C was in the middle. All right, here's one that we didn't talk about yet. So right angles are 90 degrees. Straight angles are 180 degrees. So you're looking for an angle that just makes a straight 180 degrees. So that would be something like this right here. If you measured this angle, that would be 180 degrees. So I have to put the U in the middle. So I'm going to call it angle CUZ. And there will be more vocabulary dealing with straight angles in the weeks to come also. You might have heard of the word supplementary before. So that will be coming soon. All right, 5 and 6 are also words that we haven't talked about yet. So there's acute and obtuse. I always think of acute like a cute little angle. So an acute angle is less than 90 degrees. So it's really between 0 and 90. And then an obtuse angle is bigger than 90 but smaller than 180. So we could say something like it's between 90 and 180 degrees. So a bigger than 90. All right, so let's see if we can find anything in this picture. We want to be careful not to make assumptions, but there's some things about triangles that you'll learn later that actually does guarantee that this angle right here has to be an acute angle. So I'm going to pick that one. That one's angle CUB, like the Cubs. So that's an acute angle. If CUB is an acute angle, something that we'll learn eventually is this one next to it that makes up the straight angle. That one must be an obtuse angle then. So I'm going to name that angle BUZ. So some of the thinking involved in how I knew for a fact that those were acute or obtuse is going to come later. But the main thing for you to know is acute angles are the small ones that are less than 90, and obtuse angles are the big ones that are more than 90. So let's work on naming angles and marking them in diagrams, and hopefully that's something that we can be experts on because it's going to come up a lot in this geometry class. Thanks for listening, and we have some practice problems for you to try. Bye.